Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, welcome to a new episode of The Quran and Science. Tamer Mumtaz with you and welcoming our dear professor, Dr. Zaghloul Al-Najjar, Head of Committee on Scientific Facts in the Glorious Quran, Supreme Council on Islamic Affairs, our dear guests, Brother Fuad and Brother Mustafa. In this episode, we'll talk about mountain roots. But first, we'll listen to a recitation of the verse 6 and 7 of Surah An-Naba.
ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا.
Haven't we made the earth as a wide expanse and the mountains as pickets?
Our dear professor.
I begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, the creator of the universe and of everything that's in it, and seeking his blessings to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the seal of that long chain of prophets and messengers sent by Allah for the guidance of man. And I dare say that again these two verses are absolutely amazing, because they contain an immense of scientific knowledge that was not known in the lifetime of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and or even for centuries after his lifetime. In the early part of the later part of the 19th century, scientists were mapping in India, and they were noticing that the pull of mountains to the plumb, which is used in the process of surveying, is less than the calculated mass.
That was in the Himalayas?
In the Himalayas, yes. And they were actually confused by this observation, and they called it the Indian problem. They thought it's something magic or something related to magic in one way or the other. But later on, scientists started to investigate this process. They started by observing the deep rifts of the earth. They came to realize the movement of the plates, of the lithospheric plates, and they came to see that the only means of fixation of these plates or bringing that movement to a big halt is the formation of mountains or mountainous chains. So how could a mountain fix the earth? They said these mountains must have deep roots, and these deep roots can fix a continent in the ocean bottom or fix a continent in another continent if the ocean separating them has been consumed by the process of closing the ocean.
How long does it take them to make such a
Of course, the process is very slow, but the science is really developing at a fantastic rate during the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. The rate of the accumulation of scientific knowledge is unbelievable.
Research is faster. Conclusions are coming faster.
Yes, yes. So they came to realize that mountains must have deep roots. They started to study this process, and they came to prove that each elevation on the surface of the globe must have a root. Every continent has a root. Every hill has a root. Every high mountain has a root. Every small mountain has a root. So the process of fixation of the earth cannot develop without mountains having roots.
And how big these roots are?
Each root is between 10 and 15 times the elevation of a mountain on the surface of our globe. So that they can be used as a means of fixation. It has to be much greater than the part elevated above the ground surface.
Isn't it 2/3 and 1/3?
No, they are between 10 to 15 times of the elevation on land. A peak like Everest, for example, which has the elevation of slightly less than 9 kilometers, 8,848 kilometers above sea level. It has got a route that is excess of 100 kilometers. 100 kilometers. And this penetrates the outer rocky layer of the earth completely and floats in the zone of weakness in exactly the same way an iceberg would float in the sea. And actually the problem of mountain roots was taken into consideration by observing icebergs. If you see an iceberg, of course you will see that the drowned part of it is much greater than the appearing part of it above sea level.
It's easier to see because the sea is not opaque like the land.
Yes, but this can be easily seen, yes. And again, in as much as they observe it, that an iceberg, the more you melt, or the sun melts part of its top, the more it rises upwardly. Until it's completely consumed.
The root is becoming less.
Becoming less, until it's completely consumed. And amazingly enough, this has been proved for rocky mountains, for any mountain composed of rock. So the mountain is not still, is not really not moving. It is moving all the time.
So the mountain could move upwards?
Move upwardly, yes.
Okay.
So the mountain root is buried into this semi-molten layer, and it floats in it in exactly the same way an iceberg root or an iceberg would float on sea.
So you're saying, for example, if we need rocks, for example, and we take it from the top of a mountain, releasing the weight from the top, would the mountain move up like the iceberg?
Whatever man can take and cannot be observed easily.
Because it will be very small.
Very small, definitely. Composed of this huge mass. But it has been proved that mountains are always moving upwardly. The more the erosion processes would take from the top of the mountains, the more the mountain will rise up. And at the same time, you will get a flow of this semi-molten material to compensate for the mass that has been taken away from the peak of the mountain.
Do we have any rate of consumption of these?
Well, it varies again between the rock composition of the mountain itself and the climatic conditions, the rate of erosion, and the rate of these processes that are taking away from the peak of the mountain.
But Professor, the root has the same composition like the mountain itself?
It can be different.
It can be different.
It can be different. But of course it has to be related because it's one composition. But the root being at the bottom, it may be slightly different from the rest of the mountain.
But its shape, is it like the mountain or is it
exactly like the peak, but the peak is going down.
Oh, so it's not like the root of a tree, for example?
It's not like the root of a tree. Or metaphorically, they call it the root of the mountain.
Okay.
So it has been scientifically proved that every elevation on the surface of land has got a downward extension. And this downward extension is 10 to 15 times the elevation of the peak of this mountain or hill or plateau or continent, whatever you call it. And without this, life would have been virtually impossible on the surface of our planet. These mountains play a very important role in the fixation of continental masses, as well as in minimizing the what I would call it, during the rotation of the Earth around its own axis, it swings, you see. There is a sign of swinging.
Oscillation.
Of the axis.
Oscillation?
Yes. So the mountains on the surface of the globe minimizes this swinging movement. And makes life possible.
So it creates a balance.
It creates the balance,
system.
indeed.
Okay.
And they simulate it by the pieces of lead that are put around the tire of the car. Because anything going in a straight line would swing right and left. So to minimize this swing movement,
they
of
add
course,
weights.
They add weight, you see. And they simulate the mountainous chains on the surface of our own Earth, with the little pieces of lead that are put around the tires of the car to give it a steady, straightforward movement.
But with these continental masses, without the mountains, what would have happened with the masses of land?
You see, we have a law that states about the isostasy of the earth. And isostasy means equal weights on the central part of the earth. Regardless, if you take the diameter, any diameter of the earth, whether this reaches the highest peak of mountains or the lowest depression of oceans and seas, they have to have equal weights. Otherwise, by the gravitational force, by the قوة الطرد المركزية, how can I say it? Centrifugal force. By the centrifugal force, any excess weight could be pushed away from the earth.
Yes.
So to make life possible on the surface of that planet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the layer below the outer rocky layer of the earth, this zone of weakness, in a semi-molten material, so that it can move all the time to compensate for any losses of weight. If you have a depressed area, you have more of this heavy material going below that depressed area to give us the isostasy, the equal weights on the central part of the earth. If you have a high peak of mountains, of course you will have less of this heavy material, so that it will give you the isostasy or the equal weights on the central part of the earth. So the mountains have got a wonderful role to play. First of all, they stabilize continental masses so that life on these continents can be possible.
What do you mean by stabilize? Would the continents actually move freely without mountains?
Freely,
Yes. We would have continental crashes?
You could just be
definitely
floating.
Yes,
float.
Just floating, as if you are skiing on ice. Actually, these continental masses are separated from each other, and they are floating on a semi-molten material. And by the rotation of the earth around its own axis, they float. They simulate skiing on ice, actually. And this is further exaggerated by seafloor spreading, because you get millions of tons of magma oozing all the time to push the sides, both sides of the ocean, right and left, you see, away from each other. So in areas of pushing the magma, you get seafloor spreading. And in areas where you get mountainous chains being built, you get shortening of the earth. You get coupling, you get one continent lying below the other, or an ocean bottom going below the other, so that it can keep the balance of the earth. This fact did not come into realization except in the middle part of the 20th century. For the Quran to spell it out that plainly. And Allah says in Surah Al-Naba, أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا. Haven't we made the earth a vast expanse so that you can walk freely in it and use the flat area to cultivate, and animals and humans can move easily on the surface of land? It has been proved scientifically that our earth started by a highly rugged topography. And this highly rugged topography was impossible to cross unless Allah has created these erosive processes: wind, running water, glaciation, gravity, plants, animals, to break down the rocks and form soil so that it can cut down ravines and valleys and create plains for man and animal to move easily on the surface of the planet.
We'll stop here for a short break, and we'll continue after the break. Thank you very much.
Reviewing the second rule of al-mim as-sakinah. That is the letter mim. So if the first mim is non-vowel or sakina, followed by a voweled mim, so I will merge the first in the letter and I will pronounce them as one. وَآمَنَهُمْ مِنْ. And we spoke abundantly on the virtues of seeking refuge with Allah from the outcast Satan. Especially for the first reciter, he's got to recite it out loud.
وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
فإذا جاءت الصاخة.
وإذا النفوس زوجت.
Make sure it's Dhamma. وإذا النفوس. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome back, dear viewers, after the break, and with Professor Zaghloul Al-Najjar, you were explaining to us how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this land for us a vast expanse.
The verses we are dealing with, the two verses we are dealing with, say, أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا, haven't we made the earth as a vast expanse? And actually, mahd in Arabic means the cradle. So comfortable, like the cradle for a little baby. And the geological history of the earth proves that the earth started with a highly complicated, rugged topography. And this topography was leveled down by the processes of erosion. Wind, running water, glaciation, gravity, plants, animals. So these solid rocks, part of it has been changed into soil so that cultivation can easily be carried out. And of course, valleys and ravines have been cut down, plateaus have been formed, plains have been created. And actually there is a process of balancing also between highly elevated areas and depressed areas. There is there is a concept in geology that talks about mountains changing into oceans and oceans changing into continents.
That's a fact, or
it is a good concept with lot of observation. You can change an ocean into a continent, and you can change a continental mass in an ocean. For example, we have the Red Sea breaking between Arabia and the rest of Africa. And this Red Sea is described as an Epionic ocean, an ocean in the childhood, a baby ocean. You see, this ocean keeps on widening. This Red Sea, longitudinal sea, keeps on widening. And if life would go on without the divine order to end it, of course this longitudinal sea will change into an ocean. And all oceans were initially longitudinal seas like the Red Sea. And that's why the Red Sea is taken as a classic example to study the development or the formation of oceans.
Sure.
So the more you spread it, you have changed this continental mass into an ocean.
Yes.
And at the same time, the other ends will collide with other continental masses to form a mountainous chain to produce a continent.
Yeah.
So the balance is going on. So really, if we spend all the wealth of the globe today, the billions and billions and billions of dollars, or sterling pounds, or dinars of human beings, to pay for the amount of energy that has peneplaned the level of the earth, we could not pay it. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing His bounties upon us.
Could we even imagine this amount of energy?
It can be calculated, definitely.
Calculated
It can be calculated, yes. Really, it's a fantastic amount of energy. We cannot pay for it.
More than nuclear energy?
More than anything you could imagine. More than anything you could imagine. Because unless this process has been going on, we could have no flat areas to live on. And we observe today that plantation and animal life cannot reach the peak of high mountains. They can stop at a level no more than 3 kilometers.
Because some mountains have plants. And
Yes, but it cannot go up on to the top peak of the mountain.
not to the very top.
You see, vegetation decreases gradually, and animal life decreases gradually. So if we started by a highly rugged topography of the earth, life would have been impossible.
Right.
So the process of erosion has broken down these rocks into soil, and we need soil for plantation, has cut down valleys and ravines, have peniplaned high peaks of mountains into plateaus and hills and hillocks, have made plains, wide plains, so that we can live on, you see. Without this, even no part of the earth would have been easily accessible. It would have been very difficult to move on earth.
And that makes me want to ask you a question.
Yes.
I want to take you back a little also. Mountains, when Allah says in the surah, وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا,
Yes.
it is translated to mean pegs.
Yes,
And pegs is is a thing that you drive into the earth.
yes.
And did Allah put these mountains after the earth was created,
Definitely.
driving it with a force? And what a
Definitely.
force would that need in order
Definitely.
to take down the
Definitely.
mountain that the root
Definitely.
is 100 times bigger
Yes,
than what
the
you will
Quran
see?
tells us that the mountains have been created after the creation of the earth.
The
You see?
Quran also says this.
Or also says that.
Subhanallah.
And this has been proved scientifically.
Really?
Yeah, really. The formation of mountains followed the creation of the earth. So the earth started with no mountains. And then mountains start to form in a very intensive process. And so that life would have been impossible on the surface of it. And then the processes of erosion started to level down these mountains, to form plateaus, plains, ravines, river valleys, and the like.
So the mountains were formed on earth rather than being put on it.
Actually, the Quran says, وَأَلْقَى فِي الْأَرْضِ رَوَاسِيَ أَن تَمِيدَ بِكُمْ. It was thrown down on it. And when we come to the process of formation of mountains, I will explain how it was thrown down on mountains. And this is again one of the miracles of the Quran, to be so precise scientifically, beyond the knowledge of the time and the knowledge of many centuries
So a mountain
after
does
the time
not-
of revelation of the Quran. Yes.
The mountain does not start young and grows.
Mountains start young and finish dead, you see. You
No, I
can
mean-
erode a mountain until the roots come to the surface. And then you find mineral wealths that need these excessive conditions of great pressures and great high temperatures so that these minerals could form. So we have nowadays we have plains that were actually roots of mountains. The Ural Mountains in Russia are actually roots of mountains. They have been eroded down so that these roots
By
came up
natural causes?
by natural processes, yes, natural processes. So the Quran says, أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا. Haven't we made the earth as a wide expanse, a vast expanse, so that you can live on it freely and easily and enjoy being on it. And this is a scientific reality. وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا. And mountains as pegs or pickets. And a peg is a piece of wood, wedge-shaped piece of wood that holds the sides of the tents to the ground. It could be made of iron as well, but basically it was wood, a wedge-shaped piece of wood that holds the sides of the tent to the ground.
And this is the
against
same shape
wind,
of the mountain.
against many other physical processes.
And the big part of this
Has to be buried
has
in
to
the
be buried
ground.
Like the root.
underneath.
Yes.
Exactly.
So really this word, أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا, this word أَوْتَادًا is absolutely miraculous. Because a watad or a peg of the tent, as you said, the greatest length of it has to be buried in the ground.
Exactly.
And the smallest part of it appears above the ground. And that's exactly the case of mountains.
And, it had
And the
to
shape
do
also.
with
The shape of
the
mountain,
shape
yes.
is also wedged also.
Indeed, indeed. So if we draw a section for any mountainous chain, you cannot find a word to describe
Better
the
than wedge.
downward extension and the surface exposure and the process of fixation better than the word peg or picket. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا. So really, the Quran, even when it comes in the context of giving a parable or an example or speaking in a metaphoric way, it still remains scientifically absolutely correct. And no human knowledge can exceed the Quranic expression in any field, in any subject, in any matter. No man can exceed the precision of the Holy Quran, even in the area of science, where people claim today to have excelled beyond any history before.
But these mountains on the day of Yawm al-Qiyam would become dust.
Of course, the Quran says that.
With all this might and power, Allah
Yes.
would make it into dust.
Indeed.
But when this also means the earth will be in mass confusion, because if the mountains are moved away, what would
Everything
happen?
will be in mass confusion, not just the earth. And you cannot imagine the amount of destruction that will be imposed not only on our planet, but on the cosmos at large, on the universe at large.
The whole universe.
Everything will collapse.
Right.
And the Quran warns us from this moment.
Yes.
Because really it's not something that can be lived with. You see, you cannot withstand it. Something beyond the capacity of any living being.
Only your deeds will help you. That's it.
Only your deeds,
That's
yes,
right.
nothing else. No.
Which seem much weaker than mountains, but they're actually stronger than mountains.
Man is the most honored creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah has honored man above all his creation. And this honor can only be contained if you remain an obedient creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, an obedient slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worshipping him in the way he has prescribed, and playing your role as a good vicegerent on earth, being a constructive element, not a destructive element on earth.
So if we were to use this sign alone, by preaching it to people,
Yes.
this alone can make everybody accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one.
Definitely. And that's why the Quran speaks elaborately about how much destruction the universe will suffer in the moment of Akhirah, the last hour. And people don't take notice of that. And we have to remind them, because we Muslims are the only group of people that have the divine revelation preserved in its divine language, in the Arabic language, the language of revelation, preserved by the will of Allah, word to word and letter to letter. You see, others do not have this. This is the most valuable wealth one can ever have. And out of belief in the unity of the human race and the brotherhood of all human beings and the responsibility in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to make this book known to as many people as we can in a kind, tender, gentle way, without any imposition. Because one of the basic rules of Islam, la ikraha fi din. There should never ever be any compulsion in the religion.
Dr. Zaghloul, I'm so amazed and so proud of of the accuracy and the precisely of the words chosen for these things, for these ayahs, these miracles that we have here.
Definitely.
And I'm so happy and grateful to Allah that I'm a Muslim. I'm very proud I'm a Muslim.
Barakallah feek.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil
Allah
Alameen.
bless you.
Yes,
You see, you cannot remove. You see, Arabic language is a very rich language, and you can have many synonyms for each word. But believe me, I have tried to use another synonym to any of the Quranic words, and I have failed. You cannot change it. The word autad here, you cannot replace it by anything else.
It is put in its best form.
In English, they say mountain roots. It's not roots. This is a metaphoric way of describing it, you see. But autad, a mountain peg or picket, wallahi, is more precise than anything else.
No other word
Yes.
can be chosen for
SubhanAllah.
it. SubhanAllah.
You have any questions about what I have said?
Yeah,
We're just truly awestruck to think that actually mountains would have roots, and mountains, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make these mountains dust on the day of judgment. And
Yes.
What else can we say?
Yes.
Other than
Yes.
Alhamdulillah, we are Muslims.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Just before we finish the episode, I just want to imagine the amount of energy needed to explode a whole mountain to dust.
You see, mountains are not single entities. Mountains are usually found in longitudinal chains and complex chains of mountains. Single mountains can only be formed by volcanic eruption. You see, like Mount Kenya, for example, Mount Ararat in Turkey. These are volcanic mountains, and that's why you can find a single mountain peak. But usually, when mountains are formed by plate tectonics, by the process of crushing one continent against another, you see, they are in huge chains that can extend for thousands of kilometers. Take, for example, the Rockies and the Andes chain in Western America. It's a huge chain. Take the Alpine chain in southern Europe, or the Zagros chain in western Iran, Taurus chain in southern Turkey, the Himalayas, you see. So they run in a complex pattern.
Right.
And that's why, as Fuad is saying, how could you imagine that such a chain would be destroyed to be in the form of al-'ayn al-manfush, actually like dust, something, a piece of cotton that has been shredded away from each other, you see. There is the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this again reflects on the greatness of our Creator, the omnipotent, the omnipresent, the Lord of everything, the Supreme Being that orders things to be, and it will be.
SubhanAllah. May Allah allow us to glorify Him as we should. Thank you, Professor Zaghloul. Thank you, Brother Fuad, Brother Mustafa. Thank you, dear viewers. And we've come to the end of this episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.